And so Acts 15 verse 24, the Jerusalem Synod says, to whom we gave no such commandment. We didn't tell them to go there and teach that at all. And then of course the problem is, how is this going to affect our relationship with the church in Jerusalem? If this is the true gospel, if these men are really bringing the word that's being taught in Jerusalem, are we now going to have to split from them? Is there going to be a huge schism and doctrinal disagreement between us in Antioch and them in Jerusalem, when we've had such a good, mutually beneficial relationship for years? You could imagine what the trouble and grief would be in this congregation if, when the church visitors from the PRC come, as the plan is in January, Lord willing, they come here and stand, I imagine where I'm standing, and started teaching this false gospel, or maybe even some other false doctrine, telling it to you, and you go all out of the church troubled, disturbed, soul subverted. What's happening now? What's going on here? Where's this going to lead? Or, of course, if I, let's say, from the CPRC or some of the elders here went down to Limerick and started spreading a different doctrine from that which we had received. Troubled, subverted, grieved. Easy to understand then why the saints at Antioch were so deeply disturbed. Easy to understand, therefore, the dispute between Paul and Barnabas and these teachers from Judea. As soon as Paul and Barnabas heard what they were teaching, a debate began. Verse 2 says, when therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension, it's an understatement, no small dissension, they had a very sharp, fierce row, debate and disputation with them. These men have come here with a false gospel. They have undermined the mission work. They're dividing and destroying the church. And then we lose the truth of God's grace in Jesus Christ and His cross. What they say is right. And so there was this debate, no small debate, a major dispute between Paul and Barnabas and these brethren from Judea. And at the end of it, apparently, the men from Judea were not convinced by Paul and Barnabas. They were convinced in their hearts, because the truth always carries its own message, that they were teaching falsely, but they wouldn't admit it, apparently. Then the question is, what do we do now? Paul and Barnabas publicly are opposed to teachers from Judea. What do we do now? At this point, Antioch could have said, well, Paul's an apostle. Paul, are you speaking by direct inspiration of God when you declare justification by faith alone? Yes, I am. Well, there you are. He's an apostle. He's given us an inerrant, infallible declaration. That settles it. And if you disagree with Paul, you hold a false gospel. Now, decide on which side of the fence you stand. You could have done that, hypothetically. You could say that that may well have settled it at Antioch, but what about Jerusalem? What about Judea, where these men came from? Instead, it was suggested, how about involving Jerusalem, our mother church, in a decision about what these men are teaching, and therefore also about these men too? What about involving them? What about doing this so that the two main churches in the Christian world at that time, Antioch and Jerusalem, will both be united in the same truth over against this false doctrine? How about Antioch and Jerusalem teaming up to reach a decision which would involve Paul, one of the apostles, now based in Antioch for the time, and the 12 apostles, or rather the 11 apostles, since James has been martyred. And then, if Antioch and Jerusalem, and Paul and the other 11 apostles can unite, then we have a united position under Jesus Christ. Then we can send a united message to all the other churches, and we can bring a united message with the authority of Antioch and Jerusalem under the ascended Christ. Bring that same united message to all new mission works. That's a better idea. And it would have been considerations like this which prevailed. And you can picture the church council at Antioch meeting. Well, you heard what these Judean brethren said. You see the effect it's having in the congregation. Now, what do we do about it? This is not only a local affair involving us at Antioch, but these men have spread it in Syria and Cilicia, and they came from Judea, and they're saying that the church in Jerusalem teaches this. Now, what should we do? Verse 2 says, they determined that Paul and Barnabas, and certain other of them, should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about this question. Paul and Barnabas, they seem to be sent to all these tough and responsible callings, and certain other, that is, office bearers, maybe some pastors, teachers, maybe some of the prophets, mentioned at the start of Acts 13, some ruling elders. And I say office bearers here because the Jerusalem assembly was an assembly of office bearers. The Jerusalem delegates were apostles and elders. And this means that Paul and Barnabas now have been sent by Antioch for the third time. The first time they were sent, you could say they were doing a sort of diaconal work, bringing an offering from Antioch to Jerusalem and Judea at the end of Acts 11. The second time they were sent out was the first missionary journey in Acts 13, the start of it. And there they're doing not so much diaconal work as pastoral work, as preaching. And now the third time they're going up to the Jerusalem assembly at the behest of the council in Antioch, and they're doing more elders' work. Acts 15. Diaconal work, bringing up the offering to Jerusalem. Then pastoral or prophetic work on the first missionary journey. And now more sort of elder work at the Jerusalem assembly. Because apostles, as being the chief office in the early apostolic church, in the early church, included within that office pastors, teachers, and elders, and deacons. And it was much greater even than that too, the office of apostle. So off they went, being accompanied by the church part of the way, heading south. And if you could picture on a map in your mind, heading south from Antioch, you go through Phoenicia, and then Samaria, before you come to Judea and Jerusalem. Not once to lose an opportunity to address the churches, to further their unity, to spread the knowledge of the missionary work of the congregations of Christ together. They told them, as they went through the churches in these various places, they told them about God's work in Antioch, how that work had started and was flourishing. They told them about the progress in the missionary work on the first missionary journey. Verse 3 says, they caused great joy unto all the brethren. Because the people in these churches wanted to hear of the spread of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the bringing in of new sheep into the fold of the Lord. And when they finally got to Jerusalem, Paul and Barnabas and the others deputed by the church at Antioch were well received. All the saints came together with their office bearers. And apparently the 11 apostles were all in town at this time.